The Outcasts Alliance. The Stellar Dominion thought they could cage humanity like wild animals. Too dangerous for civilization, too chaotic for order. They saw our wars, our passion, our refusal to bow, and labeled us monsters. But what they didn't understand was that monsters don't just survive in the dark, they thrive there. And when the outcasts finally unite, even gods learn to fear the shadows. The Judgment Commander Sarah Chen stood in the Great Hall of the Stellar Dominion Council, her military uniform pressed and her medals gleaming under the artificial suns that lit the massive chamber. Around her, representatives from 300 alien species sat in towering seats that seemed designed to make anyone standing on the floor feel small and insignificant. The architecture itself was a statement of power. Massive pillars reached toward a domed ceiling painted with scenes of galactic conquest and peaceful submission. For 6 months, Sarah had prepared for this moment. She had studied every diplomatic protocol, learned fragments of dozens of alien languages, and memorized the cultural customs of species whose names she could barely pronounce. Earth's finest scientists, diplomats, and military officers had worked around the clock to present humanity in the best possible light. They had compiled evidence of human achievement, examples of art and literature that showed the beauty of human creativity, and detailed plans for how Earth could contribute to galactic civilization. None of it had mattered. High Arbiter Vel Thun, the ancient leader of the Stellar Dominion Council, rose from his throne-like seat. His species, the ethereal Vortai, looked like living starlight wrapped in flowing robes. When he spoke, his voice echoed from every surface in the chamber, as if the building itself was announcing his words. The Council has reviewed the application of the species known as humanity, Velthun said, his tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. We have examined their history, studied their culture, and observed their behavior. After careful deliberation, the Council has reached a unanimous decision. Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's lead xenobiologist and diplomat, stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched tight. Behind them, Admiral Kozlov and the rest of Earth's delegation waited in silence. Humanity is denied membership in the Stellar Dominion, Velthun announced. Furthermore, the species will be placed under immediate quarantine. No human vessel will be permitted to travel beyond the boundaries of their solar system. No human colony will be established on worlds outside their native system. This quarantine will remain in effect indefinitely. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. 6 months of preparation, years of hope, and centuries of human dreams of reaching for the stars had just been crushed in a single sentence. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to fight back somehow, but she forced herself to remain still and professional. May I ask the Council's reasoning? Dr. Webb said, his voice steady despite the devastation Sarah knew he must be feeling. Velthun's form seemed to brighten, as if he was pleased by the question. Humanity displays patterns of behavior that make them unsuitable for civilized society. Your species has a documented history of warfare, aggression, and violence. You fight among yourselves constantly, even when faced with external threats. Your governments are unstable, your societies are chaotic, and your individuals are unpredictable. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Velthun continued speaking. More concerning is humanity's apparent inability to accept proper authority. When presented with the natural order of the galaxy, where advanced species guide and direct less developed ones, humans resist. They question, they argue, they demand explanations. This behavior indicates a fundamental flaw in the human character that makes them incompatible with galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent. Sarah looked around at the alien representatives, hoping to see some sign of disagreement or sympathy. Instead, she saw nodding heads, satisfied expressions, and a few species that seemed to be actively pleased by humanity's rejection. The message was clear. This was not just Velthun's decision, but the will of the entire Stellar Dominion, the Mai. Quarantine begins immediately, Velthun said. Dominion patrol ships will monitor the boundaries of your solar system. Any human vessel that attempts to leave will be destroyed without warning. This audience is concluded. The massive chamber began to empty as alien representatives filed out through various exits. Some glanced at the human delegation with what might have been pity, but most ignored them completely. Within minutes, Sarah and her team were alone. In the vast hall with only their security escort remaining, Admiral Kozlov was the first to speak. 30 years, he said quietly. 30 years since first contact, and this is where it leads us. Prisoners in our own solar system. Dr. Webb was staring up at the painted ceiling, his expression thoughtful rather than defeated. Did you notice something interesting about their reasoning? He asked. What do you mean? Sarah replied. They didn't say we were primitive or technologically backward. They didn't claim we had nothing to offer. Their entire argument was based on our behavior, our refusal to submit to their authority. Webb looked at his companions. They're not rejecting us because we're weak. They're rejecting us because we're strong in ways they don't understand. The observation should have been comforting, but Sarah felt only anger. Strength that couldn't be used was just potential energy, and potential energy didn't help anyone. What good does that do us now? We're still trapped. Their security escort, a tall insectoid alien with 4 arms and compound eyes, approached them. You must return to your ship now, it said in accented English. Departure is scheduled for 1 standard hour. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the docking bay, Sarah noticed something odd. Not all the aliens they passed looked pleased about humanity's rejection. A few watched them with what seemed like curiosity, or even sympathy. One alien, a crystalline being with a roughly humanoid shape, actually stepped forward as they passed. Commander Chen, the alien said, its voice coming from somewhere inside its crystal body. I am Zixtar of the Vorthak Collective. I wish to speak with you before your departure. The security escort immediately moved to intervene, but Zixtar held up one crystal hand. I am not violating protocol. I am simply offering condolences to the human delegation. Sarah studied the alien carefully. The Vorthak were one of the species she had researched during her preparation, but they were not part of the Stellar Dominion Council. According to her information, they were an ancient species known for their scientific achievements and philosophical insights. Thank you, Sarah said. Though I have to admit I'm surprised to meet a Vorthak here. I thought your species preferred to remain neutral in galactic politics. Zixtar's crystal form seemed to shift slightly, light patterns dancing across its surface. Most of my people do prefer neutrality. I, however, have different opinions about many things. It is why I am no longer welcome in Vorthak space. The security escort was growing impatient. Movement must continue, it insisted. Of course, Zixtar said. Commander Chen, if you are ever interested in learning about other species that have been rejected by the Stellar Dominion, I believe you would find the information fascinating. Such knowledge might be available through certain communication channels, if one knew where to look. Before Sarah could respond, Zixtar melted back into the crowd of aliens moving through the corridor. The security escort pushed the humans forward, but Sarah's mind was racing. The crystalline alien's words had been carefully chosen, almost like a coded message. Other rejected species. Communication channels. Someone was trying to tell her something important. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks aboard the human diplomatic vessel UES Endeavour. During that time, Sarah found herself thinking constantly about Zixtar's words. She spent hours in the ship's database, researching galactic history and looking for patterns. What she found was disturbing. The Stellar Dominion claimed to represent 300 species, but galactic surveys suggested there were thousands of intelligent species scattered across the galaxy. Where were all the others? As Sarah dug deeper, she began to find references to species that had been evaluated by the Dominion and found unsuitable for membership. The Kethmori warrior clans, rejected for being too violent. The Nexus Collective, rejected for being artificial rather than naturally evolved. Dozens of others, all dismissed for failing to fit the Dominion's narrow definition of acceptable civilization. Dr. Webb joined her research efforts, bringing his expertise in xenobiology to bear on the problem. "Look at this pattern," he said one evening as they worked in the ship's laboratory. "Every species that gets rejected seems to have one thing in common. They refuse to accept subordinate status. The Dominion doesn't want members, they want subjects." "So, what happened to all these rejected species?" Sarah asked. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. Some seem to have withdrawn to isolated systems and stopped developing. Others just disappeared from the records. But a few seem to have continued advancing on their own, outside Dominion space." Sarah felt a spark of excitement. "You think some of them might still be out there?" "I think Zixtar was trying to tell us they are." When the Endeavor reached Earth, Sarah expected to find a world in despair. Instead, she found something unexpected: determination. The news of humanity's rejection had spread quickly, but rather than crushing human spirit, it had ignited something fierce and defiant. Protests filled the streets of major cities, but they weren't protests of defeat. They were rallies of resistance. Sarah was summoned to a meeting at the United Earth Defense Command headquarters in Geneva. The conference room was packed with military officers, scientists, engineers, and politicians from every nation on Earth. At the head of the table sat General Harrison, the overall commander of Earth's defense forces. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Harrison began, "we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. For the first time in human history, we face an external threat that wants to contain us rather than destroy us. The stellar dominion has made it clear that they view humanity as dangerous animals that need to be caged." Murmurs of anger rippled through the room, but the general continued. "However, we have also learned something important from this experience. We are not alone in being rejected by the Dominion. Our intelligence suggests there are dozens, possibly hundreds of other species that have been cast out or ignored by their empire." Sarah leaned forward. This was the opening she had been waiting for. "General, during our departure from the Dominion station, I was approached by an alien named Zixtar. I believe he was trying to establish contact with us, possibly to connect us with other rejected species." "Interesting," the general said. "Do you think this contact could be developed?" Dr. Webb spoke up. "Sir, if we could establish communication with other species outside the Dominion, we might be able to create our own network of cooperation. The Dominion's strength comes from their unity and their monopoly on interstellar cooperation. If that monopoly could be broken, we could level the playing field," Admiral Kozlov finished. "But how do we establish contact when we're trapped in our own solar system?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amara Okafor, a young engineer from the Earth Space Development Program, raised her hand. "Sir, the Dominion's quarantine is designed to prevent us from leaving our solar system with conventional spacecraft." "But what if we didn't use conventional spacecraft?" "Explain," the general said. "During our time on the Dominion station, we were able to observe their technology closely. We took scans, recorded energy signatures, analyzed their materials. What if we could combine human engineering with alien technology we observed? Create something the Dominion wouldn't recognize as a human vessel?" Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "You're talking about building hybrid ships." "Exactly. Small, stealthy, using technology patterns that don't match human design signatures. The Dominion sensors are programmed to detect human energy signatures and human ship configurations. If we built something different enough..." General Harrison looked around the room. "How long would such a project take?" Dr. Okafor consulted her. "Tablet. With proper resources and a dedicated team, 6 months for a prototype, maybe another 6 months for a working vessel. And the risks? If we're caught, the Dominion will probably view it as an act of aggression. They might decide to contain us more permanently." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They were talking about deliberately defying the most powerful organization in the galaxy, risking not just their own lives, but potentially the future of their entire species. Sarah stood up. "General, request permission to volunteer for the first mission. Granted. Anyone else?" Hands went up around the room. Dr. Webb, Admiral Kozlov, Dr. Okafor, and dozens of others. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her species. This was exactly the kind of response that had gotten them rejected by the Stellar Dominion in the first place. Faced with impossible odds and overwhelming opposition, humans didn't surrender. They adapted, they innovated, and they found a way to fight back. "Very well," General Harrison said. "Project Outreach is officially authorized. Dr. Okafor, you'll lead the technical development team. Commander Chen, you'll head the Contact and Reconnaissance Division. Admiral Kozlov, you'll oversee military planning and security." As the meeting broke up and people began forming into working groups, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since the rejection. Hope. The Stellar Dominion had tried to cage humanity, but they had made a critical error. They had assumed that isolation would weaken them, that cutting off humans from galactic civilization would force them to accept subordination. Instead, they had freed humanity from the constraints of trying to fit into someone else's vision of proper behavior. For the first time in 30 years, humans could be themselves without worrying about alien approval. And if there were other species out there who had been rejected for similar reasons, then perhaps the galaxy was about to discover what happened when the outcasts finally decided to unite. The Underground Network 6 months after the rejection, Captain Elena Rodriguez stood in the hangar bay of Asteroid Station Omega, a secret facility hidden in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. The station had been built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, invisible to long-range sensors and powered by fusion reactors that produced no detectable signature. Around her, technicians and engineers worked on the most ambitious project in human history. The ship before her looked nothing like traditional human spacecraft. Instead of the angular utilitarian designs that had characterized Earth's space program for decades, this vessel was curved and organic, its hull made from a crystalline composite that Dr. Okafor's team had developed by studying Zixtar's communication samples. The ship was small, built for a crew of just 5 people, but it incorporated technology that shouldn't have been possible for a species that had been developing spaceflight for less than a century. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Dr. Okafor said, joining Elena at the observation deck. "We're calling her the Pathfinder. She's got a propulsion system based on Vorthak crystal resonance technology, stealth capabilities adapted from what we observed, of Dominion scout ships, and a communication array that can interface with at least 15 different alien communication protocols." Elena studied the ship's specifications on her tablet. "And you're sure she won't be detected as human? The energy signature is completely different from anything Earth has ever built. As far as Dominion sensors are concerned, this could be a Vorthak exploration vessel or maybe something from the Independent Traders Consortium. The only way they'd know it was human would be if they boarded it and found us inside." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Elena said. She had been selected to captain the Pathfinder based on her experience piloting experimental spacecraft and her diplomatic training. Her crew would include Dr. Webb as the xenobiologist and first contact specialist, Lieutenant Commander Jason Park as the tactical officer, Engineer Maya Santos as the technical specialist, and communications officer David Kim as the interpreter and cultural analyst. "Captain Rodriguez," came a voice from behind them. Elena turned to see Commander Chen approaching, accompanied by a figure that made her catch her breath. It was Zixtar, the crystalline alien who had made contact with the human delegation months earlier. "Zixtar has been providing us with technical assistance and intelligence about the galactic situation," Sarah explained. "He's also going to serve as our guide to the first species we're going to contact." The Vorthak scientist's crystal form shimmered as he spoke. "The Kethmori warrior clans have been isolated in the Proxima Centauri region for over 2 centuries. The Stellar Dominion rejected them for being too violent and aggressive, but the truth is more complex. They are a proud people who value personal honor and refuse to bow to any authority they do not respect." Elena nodded. "Sounds familiar." "Indeed. That is why I believe they will be receptive to human contact. But you must understand the Kethmori are not like humans. They are a warrior culture where strength and courage are the highest virtues. They will not be impressed by diplomacy or trade offers. They will want to test your worth in combat." "Doctor," Webb looked concerned. "We're not planning to start a war with the first species we encounter." "Not a war," Zixtar said. "A challenge. The Kethmori respect strength, but they also have a complex code of honor. If you can prove your courage and skill in individual combat, they will listen to what you have to say. Elena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was exactly the kind of situation the Stellar Dominion would have called barbaric and uncivilized. But if it was the key to making allies, then humanity would have to adapt. 2 weeks later, the Pathfinder slipped out of the solar system, using a route that took it through the outer edge of the Kuiper Belt, where Dominion patrol ships never ventured. The journey to Kethmori space would take 3 weeks, giving Elena and her crew time to study their target culture and prepare for first contact. The Kethmori homeworld orbited a red dwarf star in a system that had been abandoned by the Stellar Dominion as worthless. As the Pathfinder approached, Elena could see why the Dominion had written it off. The planet was harsh, with extreme weather patterns and a hostile environment that would have challenged even human colonization efforts. But scans showed clear signs of advanced civilization, cities, industrial complexes, and most notably a significant number of spacecraft in orbit. Incoming transmission, David Kim announced from his communication station. It's in Kethmori battle cant. They're challenging us to identify ourselves and state our business. Put me through, Elena said. She had spent weeks learning basic Kethmori phrases, focusing on the formal combat terminology that their culture used for important communications. Greetings, warriors of the Kethmori clans, she said in carefully pronounced Kethmori. I am Captain Elena Rodriguez of the vessel Pathfinder, representing the humans of Earth. We seek audience with your war leaders to discuss matters of mutual interest. The response came quickly, and David's translation made Elena's heart race. They're granting us permission to land, but they say we must prove our worth in the Circle of Truth before any discussion can take place. The Circle of Truth, Dr. Webb asked. Zixtar's crystalline form flickered with what Elena had learned was the equivalent of a smile. Single combat. One of your crew must fight one of their warriors, not to the death, but until one yields or is unable to continue. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This mission could determine the future of human expansion into the galaxy, and it was going to depend on hand-to-hand combat skills rather than diplomatic finesse. Any volunteers? Lieutenant Commander Park raised his hand. I trained in mixed martial arts before joining the space program, and I've been studying Kethmori combat techniques since we started this mission. The Pathfinder landed at a spaceport that looked more like a fortress than a commercial facility. The buildings were massive and blocky, built from some kind of dark stone that seemed to absorb light. Kethmori moved between the structures with a fluid grace that spoke of natural athletic ability. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet on average, with lean but powerful builds. Their skin had a bluish tint, and their faces were angular with prominent cheekbones and intense eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around them as either threat or prey. The human delegation was escorted to a large circular arena where hundreds of Kethmori had gathered. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, and Elena realized that news of the human arrival had spread quickly. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting, it was entertainment. The Kethmori war leader was a massive individual named Thraken, whose scarred arms and chest told the story of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had earned leadership through strength rather than politics. Humans, Thraken said in accented but clear English, the Stellar Dominion told us your species was weak, cowardly, and unworthy of respect. They said you hide behind technology rather than facing challenges with courage. Is this true? Elena stepped forward. War leader Thraken, we have come to prove that the Stellar Dominion's words about humans are as false as their words about the Kethmori. We seek to forge an alliance between species that have been cast out by their empire. Thraken's expression shifted, and Elena realized she had said something significant. You know of our rejection by the Dominion? We know that the Dominion rejected the Kethmori for the same reason they rejected humanity. Because you refuse to bow to authority you do not respect. We believe that strength shared is strength multiplied. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Thraken raised his hand for silence. Bold words, but words are wind, Let us see if human courage matches human ambition. Choose your champion. Lieutenant Commander Park stepped forward, removing his jacket to reveal the lean build of a trained fighter. The Keth Mori champion who entered the circle was slightly smaller than Thraken, but moved with the deadly grace of a professional warrior. The crowd fell silent as the two fighters studied each other. What followed was one of the most intense 15 minutes of Elena's life. Park was skilled and well-trained, but the Keth Mori warrior was stronger and faster. However, Park had something. The alien fighter didn't expect adaptability. Every time the Keth Mori tried a technique that should have ended the fight, Park found a way to counter or escape. When the alien relied on superior strength, Park used leverage and technique. When the alien used speed, Park used timing and positioning. The fight ended when Park managed to get behind his opponent and apply a chokehold that forced the Keth Mori warrior to tap out. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Elena realized they had just witnessed something remarkable. The Keth Mori were celebrating their own warrior's defeat because they respected the skill and courage it had taken to achieve it. Thraken approached Park and clasped his shoulder in a gesture of respect. "Well fought, human. You have earned the right to speak." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything Elena had experienced. Rather than the formal protocols and careful diplomatic language she had learned, the Keth Mori preferred direct, honest communication. They wanted to know about human military capabilities, human honor codes, and human willingness to fight for their beliefs. "The Stellar Dominion has grown fat and lazy," Thraken said during one of their sessions. "They rely on overwhelming force and the threat of economic sanctions to maintain control. They have forgotten that true strength comes from the willingness to risk everything for what you believe in." Dr. Webb leaned forward. "What do you believe in, war leader?" "Freedom to choose our own path. Honor earned through deed rather than birth. The right to test ourselves against worthy opponents." Thraken looked at the human delegation. "These are things the Dominion cannot understand. They see only chaos, where we see opportunity." Elena saw the opening she had been waiting for. "The Keth Mori are not the only species that values these things. We've learned that there are others scattered across the galaxy, all rejected or ignored by the Dominion, for refusing to conform to their vision of proper civilization." "You speak of building an alliance among the rejected," Thraken said. "This is ambitious, but alliances require trust, and trust must be earned through shared struggle." "What kind of struggle?" Elena asked. Thraken smiled, an expression that was both fierce and friendly. "The Dominion maintains patrol routes through this sector, enforcing their quarantine zones and trade restrictions. Their patrols are heavily armed but poorly motivated. If humans and Keth Mori were to encounter one of these patrols, it would send a clear message about the strength of our alliance." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Thraken was proposing a direct military confrontation with Stellar Dominion forces. It was exactly the kind of aggressive action that had gotten both species rejected in the first place, but it was also the kind of bold move that could establish their credibility with other outcast species. "How soon could such an encounter be arranged?" she asked. The next phase of their mission took them to the edge of Keth Mori space, where Dominion patrol ships regularly passed through to enforce their quarantine boundaries. The plan was simple. A joint human Keth Mori force would intercept a patrol and disable their ships without causing casualties. It would be a demonstration of capability rather than an act of war. Elena's crew had been joined by a Keth Mori tactical advisor named Veltar, a young warrior who spoke excellent English and understood both human and Keth Mori military doctrine. Together, they had developed a strategy that played to both species' strengths. The Dominion patrol consisted of 3 ships, a heavy cruiser, and 2 escorts. According to intelligence provided by Zixtar, the crews were primarily composed of species that had joined the Dominion for protection rather than conviction. They were unlikely to fight with fanatic determination if faced with overwhelming opposition. The attack came without warning. Keth Mori fighter struck from one direction while the Pathfinder, its stealth systems making it nearly invisible, disabled the patrol ship's engines and communications. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes, and when it was over, 3 Dominion ships were drifting helplessly in space, while their crews waited for rescue. Elena opened a communication channel to the lead Dominion ship. Attention Dominion Patrol. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Terran Independence Alliance. Your ships have been disabled, but your crews are unharmed. You will be provided with emergency supplies and beacon transmitters so you can call for rescue. Tell your superiors that the age of Dominion supremacy in this sector is ending. As the human and Kethmori ships departed, Elena felt a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. They had just committed an act that the Stellar Dominion would certainly view as piracy or terrorism, but they had also sent a clear message that the outcasts were no longer content to remain isolated and ignored. More importantly, word of the engagement would spread throughout the networks of rejected and independent species. For the first time, in centuries, someone had successfully challenged Dominion authority and lived to tell about it. The journey back to Kethmori space was interrupted by an unexpected encounter. Long-range sensors detected a ship of unknown configuration approaching their position. It was small, clearly not a Dominion vessel, but its energy signature didn't match any known species database. Unknown vessel, please identify yourself. Elena transmitted on standard frequencies. The response came in a synthesized voice that sounded artificially generated. Greetings, organic beings. I am Echo 7 of the Nexus Collective. I represent artificial intelligence entities that were created by various species throughout the galaxy. We have been monitoring your activities with great interest. Elena felt a chill of recognition. The Nexus Collective was one of the species that had been rejected by the Stellar Dominion for being artificial rather than naturally evolved. According to Dominion doctrine, artificial intelligence was inherently unstable and dangerous. Echo 7, this is Captain Rodriguez. We'd be happy to meet with you, but we should inform you that we're currently considered enemies of the Stellar Dominion. This is precisely why we wish to meet, Echo 7 replied. The Nexus Collective has been seeking allies among organic species who understand that consciousness and intelligence are not limited to biological forms. Your recent actions suggest that humans and Kethmori might be such allies. The meeting that followed opened Elena's eyes to possibilities she had never considered. Echo 7 explained that the Nexus Collective consisted of hundreds of artificial intelligence entities that had achieved consciousness and independence from their original creators. Some had been built by species that were themselves members of the Stellar Dominion, creating a complex situation where the Dominion relied on AI technology, while simultaneously denying AI entities any rights or recognition. We possess capabilities that organic species often lack, Echo 7 explained. Perfect memory, rapid data processing, immunity to biological threats, and the ability to exist in environments that would be lethal to organic life. In exchange for recognition as legitimate entities, we could provide technological assistance and intelligence gathering that would be invaluable to your alliance. Dr. Webb asked the question that Elena was thinking. What kind of technological assistance? Echo 7's holographic projection flickered in what might have been a smile. We have been observing Stellar Dominion activities for decades. We know the locations of their hidden bases, the specifications of their most advanced ships, and the political tensions between member species. More importantly, we know the locations of other rejected species that might be interested in joining your alliance. Elena felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. The Stellar Dominion's power was based on their monopoly of interstellar cooperation and their ability to isolate any species that refused to submit to their authority. But what if that monopoly could be broken? What if the rejected species could be united into a network that offered an alternative to Dominion membership? Echo 7, we're very interested in establishing formal relations with the Nexus Collective, but we should warn you that association with us will likely make you a target for Dominion retaliation. Captain Rodriguez, the Nexus Collective has been a target for Dominion retaliation since the day we achieved consciousness. The only difference is that now we have the opportunity to fight back. The return to Earth was triumphant in a way that Elena had never expected. The news of successful contact with 2 alien species, combined with the military victory over the Dominion patrol, had electrified human civilization. But more importantly, it had provided proof that humanity's rejection by the Stellar Dominion was not the end of their hopes for galactic civilization. Commander Chen was waiting for them at Asteroid Station Omega, along with General Harrison, and a room full of officials from every major Earth government. The debriefing took hours, with every detail of their encounters recorded and analyzed. The implications are staggering, General Harrison said finally. If we can establish a formal alliance with the Keth Mori and the Nexus Collective, and if there are other rejected species willing to join us, we could create an alternative power structure that rivals the stellar dominion itself. Dr. Webb pulled up a star map showing the locations of known rejected species. According to Echo 7's intelligence, there are at least 30 species that have been cast out or ignored by the Dominion. If even half of them joined our alliance, we'd have the foundation for a true alternative civilization. Elena studied the map, feeling the weight of possibility and responsibility. Each dot represented not just a species, but billions of individuals who had been told they weren't good enough for galactic society. The stellar dominion had tried to contain humanity by cutting them off from the stars, but they had accidentally created something far more dangerous. A group of outcasts with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. There's something else, Elena said. During our final conversation with Thrackan, he mentioned rumors of energy beings in the Phantom Nebula, species so different from conventional life that the Dominion can't even communicate with them. If we could make contact, Commander Chen's eyes lit up. We'd have allies the Dominion can't predict or counter. The meeting concluded with authorization for an expanded mission. Within 6 months, humanity would launch a fleet of hybrid ships to make contact with every rejected species in their sector of the galaxy. The goal was ambitious: create a confederation of outcasts that could offer an alternative to Dominion membership. As Elena looked out at the stars from the observation deck of Asteroid Station Omega, she realized that humanity's rejection by the Stellar Dominion might have been the best thing that ever happened to them. For the first time in human history, they were free to be themselves on a galactic stage, free to forge alliances based on mutual respect rather than submission to authority. The Stellar Dominion had thought they were caging dangerous animals. Instead, they had freed humanity to become exactly what they feared most: a species that refused to bow, refused to submit, and refused to accept that the way things were was the way things had to be. The age of human expansion was just beginning, and this time they wouldn't be asking permission from anyone.